Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 120. Our guest this week is a gamer and video game historian. Maybe I shouldn't have said gamer. We'll get into that. But your research focuses on video games in the 70s and 80s, gender and culture. You are the author of Hot Tubs and Pac-Man, Gender and the Early Video Game Industry in the United States. Digital Humanities Librarian at the University of Alabama, co-host of Seasonal Anime Checkup Podcast, and the Gamers, Devs, and Scholars Podcast you are a part of as well. We have Dr. Ladyem McDivitt. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We will start with, you find Inscription boring. And this interview is over, get out.
I think it does some very interesting things. The gameplay is not for me.
Right. Well, you said
it's beautiful.
You said you don't like card games, and I know you ended up getting into this anyway, but I'll make you explain it here. You love Final Fantasy VIII, and the best part of Final Fantasy VIII is Triple Triad, the card game.
I know, everybody tells me that, and I'm like, I love Final Fantasy VIII. I love the story. I love the draw system, which I might be like one of 10 people who actually likes the draw system.
Right.
And I just like breaking that game in ways that you wouldn't expect, and that does not involve Triple Triad ever, because I'm terrible at it.
Unbelievable.
I know. I'm bad at the one in Final Fantasy 9 too, and then there's the one in 10 too that's like a weird like math thing. Oh my god, Game Boy just destroyed something. But in Final Fantasy 10 too, there's like a weird math one that I have like a calculator that I use to get through that one. But Triple Triad, not for me.
Well, 9, I definitely agree. I've never played 10-2. 9's card game is just really not... They even, like, purposely don't give you all the rules, which I'm like, okay, why are you doing this?
Right.
But 8, I mean, obviously, I love 8s, and you can't even get all the items, I think, unless you do the card game.
You are correct. You cannot. And you can also, like, if you play the card game, get the Lionheart, like, on disc 1, which I have not done.
I read your Squall write-up on your blog, and
Yay!
It made me laugh because I remember as a kid, I mean, I was impressionable. I'm still impressionable, but my older brother definitely kind of said, like, oh, I don't like Squall because he's such a, like, well, I don't want to save the world. And then I read your write-up, and I was like, am I wrong?
See, now you just have to replay Final Fantasy VIII and see if you're wrong, and that's the whole ploy to begin with, is to get more people to appreciate Final Fantasy VIII.
Right. It's come up on the show before. It's certainly, I mean, it's obviously a divisive game. It's the first Final Fantasy I beat, and I devoured, like, I loved playing it, but then every time I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, that was a dumb bit.
Well, I'm working on another Final Fantasy VIII piece right now, but I've been super, super busy, so it hasn't come out yet, but it's in my drafts right now. So eventually people will get that. It has to do with the whole, like, big plot twist that everybody seems to hate.
Right.
I have a lot to say about that, so.
Oh, I am interested to see if I'm wrong about that as well. So your thesis in 2013, I Play to Beat the Machine, Masculinity and the Video Game Industry in the United States. Masculine culture of early games and today's games, I mean, it's clearly rampant, like, it's obvious, but in particular, to me, when I see the old magazines, and I know you have a bunch of them, like, they're so poorly written.
Oh, yeah.
And they're unbelievably targeted to, like, young men and, like, derisive towards women and that. But they're just, like, these people are not writers. It's so weird to me that this was, like, a thing.
And there are clearly no editors either.
Right.
I'm actually working on, spoiler alert, some research I'm doing right now. I'm working on a magazine called Insight that ran in 1999 and 2000. And it is legitimately one of the worst things in terms of the writing. But also it's just, like, insanely sexist and violent for no good reason. Like, I'm pretty sure every single issue is like, I want to kill Pikachu. It's like, cool, why do you want to kill Pikachu? Because it's cute? Sorry. Oh, God, guy, calm down. But it is an awful magazine. Don't ever read it.
I'm picturing, like, someone putting that in as, like, an essay, and a professor, you know, their marking is like, why? Expand.
I mean, that's basically what historians do. Like, why? Expand on this. What is happening here? It is a lot that's going on in that magazine, and it's trying to be like a Maxim magazine meets a game magazine, and it's just disgusting and awful and also fascinating. And there's this great photo shoot that they did, this spread about Code Veronica, the Resident Evil game. Where they're like, let's make a sexy photo shoot with Claire Redfield. Like, cool, okay, I guess we're doing that now. But they also just went full on like racist as well. It's like, what are you guys doing? It's a mess.
There's unfortunately, I mean, you could probably draw a direct line to now a lot of YouTubers who just, there are certainly a lot of men, young boys, whatever, who clearly think that they have something to say, and they do not.
Yeah. I mean, these people clearly had a platform for less than a year. It only ran for less than a year. But they used their platform for questionable things.
Right.
Yep.
Getting more specifically into the thesis, you credit Pac-Man with bringing more women into the gaming space, or I guess allowing, I don't know how to phrase this properly. I mean, women obviously were always there, but you credit Pac-Man as sort of like...
It was a good introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I read about that in the book, too. So Pac-Man was explicitly designed to entice women, which a lot of that language is also extremely problematic, and I've mentioned that, and some of it's also probably just like reflection, trying to make it look better. But the thing with Pac-Man is it's very colorful. It has a story, quote unquote. It has a character that is interesting to look at, and it's also a relatively easy game to play in terms of control scheme because it only has the joystick. So you don't have to worry about like what buttons do I press. You literally just move the joystick. So there's a lower learning curve. So people who might have been intimidated by arcades at the time and intimidated by the idea of playing games, you know, they're like, oh, well, this one has one thing that I do. This is something I can do. And so it's kind of like the gateway drug of getting into games at the time.
So maybe you just answered this, but at your MagFest panel in 2019, you pointed out that there was a poll in May 1982 by Electronic Gaming Monthly showed women were playing all sorts of games. You know, the ones that were expected to be for men, like they loved Asteroids and Space Invaders and all that, as well as Pac-Man. So then what was so special about Pac-Man that made it like the game that brought them into the space?
Yeah, I mean, it really was just, like I said, a gateway. Because once you get more comfortable in the space and the idea of playing games, then you expand upon, like, oh, well, I want to try that one. And it's really just a matter of getting comfortable in what you're doing in order to move on to other things. So a lot of people love Pac-Man. Like, they didn't just, like, stop playing Pac-Man altogether. But they also decided, well, hey, I'm going to go try this machine over here, too. Because they felt like, okay, I can do this now. So it was a way to make it way more accessible, especially at a time where arcades were going through a weird transition of being like weird, seedy places where women didn't go into more like family-friendly kinds of locations. And even with that transition comes some weird rhetoric around like, you know, only easy women go to the arcades and play these games. It's like, what? Okay. So it's a weird period in terms of like, how are people being perceived and how are they perceiving themselves as someone who plays games and how are they transitioning into playing more games? And generally, Pac-Man was a big door opener.
My favorite pop culture version of an arcade is in the first Ninja Turtles movie when like the Foot Clan they're you know attracting young kids to be part of the Foot Clan, but to get them in they've got this arcade where it's like, you know, there's a half pipe and graffiti on the walls and one kid's like, what kind of cigarettes do you want? Wow, this place looks fun.
I love that scene. It's so great. And I think about it like way more than I probably should. I think about that movie generally way more than I probably should, but it was transformative for me. The live action quote unquote Ninja Turtle movies.
I will fight to the death that is a great movie.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with you. I would fight with you on that team. It's fantastic. It's a great film.
So is it fair to call your book, Hot Tubs and Pac-Man, an extension of your thesis?
It's an extension of some of the ideas that I formulated with the thesis. After reading back through the thesis, when I was writing the book, I'm like, I still have some issues with some of the things that I wrote. And I did some rethinking and did some more research and kind of had to really reshape what I was actually trying to say. And some of that might also be, growth as a historian. I had more experience under my belt at that point. Getting a PhD and all is kind of a weird thing. But I think it's an extension of the ideas, but not a direct extension of the content itself.
Right. Is there anything that you felt you were able to do in the book that you just weren't able to in the thesis?
I think that I was able to actually look at how women were actually moving within those spaces, whether it was the actual working in the industry itself or playing the games, that I wasn't able to get at as much in the thesis, which I did explicitly try and focus on masculinity in the thesis, but you also can't ignore that women existed. So I feel a lot better about how I was able to get some of them in the picture in the book.
One thing you talk about that never really occurred to me is that the video game crash in the 80s, which as we know is exclusively caused by E.T.
Exclusively, always, yes.
I remember you saying you would fight someone for saying that, so I wanted to see.
I will, yes.
No, of course not exclusively caused by that. But anyway, the video game crash of the 80s, one thing never occurred to me, is that halted some of the progress being made by women in the industry.
Yeah, because a lot of women at the time, there were layoffs, there were companies that were closing, and they just moved on and started working at different places and didn't come back. There are obviously some who stayed around, but Roberta Williams is a notable one. But yeah, it was just kind of like, well, this is a thing that we were doing. This is a flashpoint. Now it's gone. So what do we do? Okay, well, we move on and get to another industry instead of we're going to ride this out and we're going to keep making games later. So it sucks because it was a moment that was like, all right, it looks like on paper there was some really good momentum happening here. And there were still problems, obviously, but there was some more inclusion happening and some more ideas of how can women actually bring some great perspectives into making video games. It's well, nobody's making video games now, so
so
it's over.
Obviously, I mean, to this day, there's unfortunately lots of sexism going on in the industry.
What?
Yeah. But was there after the crash, Nintendo comes out and all that, was there an obvious sort of wow, it looks like we're back to square one in sexism, as far as games go?
It's hard for me to say because I haven't studied that period as much. It is notable that, in the 90s, we start getting more of the hypersexualized women characters. Obviously, Lara Croft is the one that everybody talks about, but even something as simple as Cammy in Street Fighter, fighting in a thong leotard is not practical for anybody, and yet here she is. And so you start getting a lot of that then, and part of that is because graphics obviously got better that you could actually portray that. But, even something like with Nintendo, you have Metroid, and if you beat it fast enough, you get Samus in a bathing suit, and it's like, oh, cool, thanks, yay, and, she's just pixels. Right. But that's your reward is pixel bikini or pixel bathing suit. I forget which one it is. I think the bikini comes later.
In May 2018, you got your PhD.
I did. Wow. Yeah, I'm still reeled by that.
Right. Well, you said at the time you couldn't put it into words how it felt. So 4 years removed, I won't ask you to put it into words necessarily, but can you compare that feeling to any sort of gaming accomplishment you've had?
Oh man. Wow.
Like any game you beat where you're like, this is just like getting my PhD.
Oh man, that's actually a really good question. I wonder if I could come up with one. I don't know, man. You might could make a comparison with me beating the Trails of Cold Steel 4 games, because that took forever and was also an emotional roller coaster that took a toll on me and had to wait for a while, and lots of cliffhangers. Could be similar. Could be similar.
All right.
I don't know about like it's something that I came away with. I was like, this is such a huge accomplishment. But yeah, I'm going to go with Cold Steel because of the length of that whole entire thing.
Your parents met in an arcade.
They did. They did.
So you were kind of destined to play video games.
I am pretty sure, yeah. I'm like, this is all your fault, guys. Like, you did this. And then, I grew up because of them and my older brother having consoles from, like, day one, so...
Did they meet in the arcade post Pac-Man?
Well, it would have been pre-Pac-Man, actually, because they got married in 1980, so... Mm-hmm. They would have been pre, but they also met when they were like 14 years old, so.
Right. But your mom's kind of a trailblazer then.
I know. And I talk about that all the time. She's like, yeah, well, I don't really think about it that much. And I'm like, well, I mean, you were in those spaces playing these things. She's like, yeah, but I was also just interested in your dad. I'm like, oh, okay, well, there is that too. I guess dad was real cute to you, but it's wild that they didn't really like interact that much until that point, because we lived in a very, very small town where like everybody knows everybody. Like, how did you guys go 14 years without knowing each other? But apparently they did.
What games do your parents like?
My mom is still dedicated very, very much to the first Mario game. And she also is a huge fan of like matching games. So like Dr. Mario, I remember my mom playing Dr. Mario like crazy when I was a kid. And even now, people make fun of folks who do this, but my mom is like disgustingly good at Candy Crush. Like, I look at her, I'm like, you are like a pro at this. It's insane. But she just sits there and does it for funsies, and she doesn't really play a whole lot lately. And Dad, when he was around, he was a big fan of, he loved doing like Wii golf and Wii bowling and stuff. He was a huge, huge fan of that, and would just like ask people like, come play this with me. And like, oh, okay. All right. And then, like, rub it in your face when he wins, and, blame the controller when he loses, and all that fun stuff. But it actually, I have more memories of my mom playing games when I was a kid than I do my dad.
Has your mom beaten Mario World 8 yet?
She's stuck on 8-1. She's been stuck on 8-1 since, 85, 86?
You're not going to help? Give her tips?
I mean, I keep trying to help her, but she wants to get through it on her own.
All right.
It's like, all right, Mom, I believe in you. And I keep giving her, like, different versions of it so that she can, like, keep having updated versions that she can actually play on her TV. And she's like, all right, she'll play it. She'll get to 8-1. Can't do it.
It is
it is a very hard world, and applaud her. She gets that far. That's impressive.
So speaking of Mario, do you call Toad Ted?
So that was a weird. I think it was an autocorrect thing.
Oh.
A lot of weird things come out of my autocorrect. Like, I was telling somebody once that I was excited, and it autocorrected to Excite Bike. And I don't know, that says a lot about me, and the fact that like my phone's like, you're not trying to say excited, you're trying to say Excite Bike. But now it's become a thing that I'm just like, yeah, I'm Excite Bike. And yeah, Ted is especially when we're mad at Toad for doing things, he's Ted.
Poor Ted.
I know, poor Ted. I actually got a nice little stuffed version of Ted that's hanging out on my bookshelves right now.
In May 2021, there was a roundtable discussion from the Organization of American Historians talking about video games and history.
Yes.
And one of the big things you talked about right off the hop, and this has come up on the podcast before, is why study games and history and that kind of stuff. But what's come up before and still baffles me is that academia would in any way object to studying games as history. Like, beyond the technological advancements that you can clearly see over the ages, like, of course it's a reflection of culture.
Yeah, it's a huge reflection of culture, and it's so important to understand, like, what was going on at that time period. And I am fully on board, and I think that more people should be on board with the idea of, like, entertainment as history is really, really fascinating. You can learn a lot about the people of the time by just following what was the entertainment. And I'm also just a big cultural historian, so there's that too, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, it's weird how many historians are just so against it. And, I use my example of the Vietnam War a lot, that, people will study that fine. And then, well, I was alive when video games were happening. It's like, you were alive then too. Like, what's the difference? And the difference tends to be that it's, entertainment, pop culture, and like lowbrow, quote unquote. So, they're just fussy old guard, and you just gotta like fight them a little bit,
I guess,
which is funny.
No one would ever discredit, books or music or anything, It's the same.
It's the same. Or even film now. Like, film has actually a pretty good following in terms of like historians. And video games, it's still like a little bit of a hesitancy for historians to be like, yeah, that's legitimate, that's fine. But it's starting to change a bit the more people who actually focus on it, which is good.
Well, did you encounter that? Well, because I know you were studying civil rights history, and then you switched and doing gaming stuff. So did you encounter that while you were making your thesis and your dissertation?
I ran into it a little bit, and I handled it the way that I've explain that I handled it. But I'm also just, what's a good phrase? I'm hard-headed. I'm really, really hard-headed. So I'm really not going to let anybody tell me, like, you shouldn't do that anyway. It's like, well, now I'm going to do it even more than I was before. So look what you've done. So that's, I don't really let it get to me that much. Just kind of do my thing, and if somebody doesn't like it, well, I probably don't like your work either, so it's fine.
In 2020, you had an article, Toxic Video Game Culture and Why I Don't Call Myself a Gamer, which is why at the start I went, ooh, I probably shouldn't have said that.
It's fine. It's fine.
No, but I agree. I mean, the article obviously gets into the baggage with the term gamer, and there is a lot, and it's warranted. And I've frequently felt I've had to explain the name of this podcast, like, oh, it's an ode to the Super Nintendo. It really has nothing to do with, like, being a gamer. But, is it another thing that's come up way before on this podcast, is that a term worth saving? Or is it just like, whatever, like, we don't have to call ourselves that?
I mean, usually what I do is I just say, like, people who play video games. And as you're aware, like, I'm on a podcast where I contribute it's like Gamers, Devs, and Scholars. So, like, that uses the term too. And I don't think it's completely unsalvageable. But it's also, it sucks when you have to be like, yeah, but not like that kind of gamer. Like, you have to put the asterisk there that, like, I'm not associated with those people. And I mean, even that article in and of itself, like, there was some fun harassment that came out of that. Yeah. Like, you're proving the point. You're literally proving the point.
Yeah. It's weird that, like, when I was a kid, like, that version of gamer baggage, like the sort of loner, out of shape kid, like, I'd much prefer that to the sexist, racist kind of idea of a gamer that we are at now.
Right? Like, man, the old stereotype was much less terrible.
Yeah. So you seem to be a big soccer fan. And I have to ask, have you moved on from Arsenal yet? Because I feel bad for you.
I actually have. I have not been able to follow it as much as I used to. I'm sure you saw that I used to be a little bit of like an Orlando City hooligan.
Yes.
There were some fun pictures of me that like they used to post on their Facebook and all that jazz. And I still have my signed Luke Bowden poster, so woohoo! And his shirt. Not his shirt. He didn't take it off. It was his kit shirt that I got his name on. But yeah, actually, it was around like my second or third year of my PhD. I was like, I cannot follow this anymore. I don't have the energy for it, and so I like will casually pay attention to it sometimes. And I have a friend who is a big Liverpool fan, and he always reminds me like when things are happening. I'm like, yeah, that's great, and I'm sure that you guys are completely destroying it, but yeah, I just don't really pay attention anymore. It's too much headspace.
Right.
Too many
Did you play
things.
soccer as a kid, or do you still play?
Oh God, no! Oh God,
you
no!
just got into it?
I am the least athletic person in the world. Like I joke constantly that if there is a sport with a ball, except for like bowling, that I tend to like get hit in the face with said ball constantly. And the first time I even tried to play soccer, I cracked a rib. So yeah, no, I'm not athletic. I am terrible at all of that, and I just like to watch people run around and kick some balls. It's fun. Not football though; that's too slow.
I'm reminded of recently, my girlfriend and I both play soccer, and it's a co-ed team, and she was in the wall blocking a free kick, and it hit her in the face.
Oh God!
And I mean, like, we've been dating for like 15 years, so I know her very well, and I saw immediately she's fine. Other people obviously, oh my God. And I, like, maybe too loudly went, she's fine. And people who didn't know we were dating were like, this guy's an asshole. Like, no, I know she's fine.
That's hilarious.
Do you still cosplay? I really like your selfie. That was a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, so the selfie was one that I handmade on a whim, thinking that I needed a costume for, we were going to a Rocky Horror screening, and they had a costume contest. So I was like, you know what, I'll just make my own. It's fine. So that was a lot of fun. I have done some. I have quite a few cosplay that I have available and ready. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of places down here to actually do the thing. So it tended to be more of like, hey, I'm just going to do this for funsies. But I've got some good ones that I have ready. And actually, a good story about this is that when I was teaching my own class at George Mason in 2017, Halloween was close to one of my class days. And I was like, all right, guys, like if you come into class in costume, I'll give you extra credit. You just can't have like a face mask on, but otherwise you're good. And I showed up in a cosplay, and I told them I would give them extra points if anybody knew who I was. And nobody could figure it out.
Was it obscure?
I didn't think so, but I guess they're not as big of nerds as a lot of people I know. But I was Mitsuha from Your Name.
Can't say I'm familiar.
Yeah, it was a pretty big film at the time, but yeah, that's what it was, and I was like, oh man, guys, like you're killing me, Smalls. But I do have quite a few ready to go if I ever get the opportunity again.
What's this fishing streams project?
Yeah. Okay, so I have a lot going on right now, and there's a lot of change that's about to happen in my life. But when things calm down, the idea is I'm just going to rebrand my Twitch, and all I'm going to do is do fishing mini games and other games. Like, that's it. That's all I'm doing. But I also want to wear, like, stupid, like, grandpa fishing shirts. Like, one of my favorites is one that's, like, the only thing I love more than fishing is being a grandpa. And, like, I totally want that shirt. I want to wear it on the stream. but that's the plan. It's just I have a whole list of games that include fishing mini games or somewhat fishing like related. Like my favorite is a note on there. Like technically you can fish in Resident Evil 4. So that's on there. But I also have it open for friends to edit and add things if they think of anything. But I've been doing a lot of setup for that and getting a few games ready to go where I could just jump right in and start fishing for hours on end. But it turns out that a lot of people think it's hysterical that I'm obsessed with fishing and games. And I will sit there and do it forever. And I was playing through the Chrono Cross remaster recently and just lamenting the fact that I couldn't fish because it's like, we live on the ocean. We live in like a fishing village. Why can't I fish? Because I had not played Chrono Cross in years and I forgot that I couldn't fish. I was just so disappointed. They let me gamble, but they won't let me fish. What is this nonsense?
Do you fish in real life?
No. I fished maybe like once or twice with my grandpa when I was a kid.
Yeah, I'm similar.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's something just really, really nice about fishing mini games. I'm like, all right, yeah, this is my jam. But fishing in real life, no. I'm like, I gotta be out in the sun. Nope.
Do you have a favorite fishing game or mini game?
Oh man. Okay. This is a tough one. I do really enjoy the fishing in the Cold Steel series. I think that it's very good. I'm actually excited because Yakuza was a weird situation that like I watched my friend play that and I'm like, I want to play that fishing minigame because it looks really, really fun. And something that people, this is going to be a controversial statement. I really like the fishing in Twilight Princess. People hate it. I love the fishing in Twilight Princess. I think it's so fun to just go out into that little fishing hole on the boat and just like sit there and fish for a while. I feel like Link needs to like chill out for a bit, you know?
He does have a hectic life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, who needs to save the princess on a like tight schedule when you just need to chill for a minute, you know?
Well, I have to plug Moonglow Bay if you haven't played that yet.
Oh, I haven't, so I'm going to have to write that down, add it to the list.
It's a whole game based around fishing. And it's
What?
adorable.
What?
Yeah, very good game.
That's my pin.
A friend of mine worked on it, so definitely got to plug that.
Okay, Moon Globe Bay.
And speaking of friends working on games, the DHSI 2021 Research Creation Game Jam Identity Politics Interventions, you made the taunting of a blinking cursor.
Oh, you found that interesting.
I did. And this is what I find funny. So I had trouble figuring out the controls at first. And I was hitting,
that's fair.
I was hitting every button and I just had the first screen and I was like, wait, is the point of the taunting that I can't get past this part? But I did make it past.
Yeah, so it turns out that was my first time like actually making a graphical video game. And I also made it in like 4 days. So 4 days, not even doing it all day. So there are definitely quirks, and it also doesn't have an ending or anything really. It was just kind of an experiment on my part.
How'd it go? How did you feel about it?
It was a lot of fun, and I would definitely do it again. I would probably try and do a better job with it if I could have more time. But I thought that the process of making it was really fascinating, and I wish that I could have gotten the turn-based battle system to work better than I did. But yeah, I think it could be really cool if I actually like went in and polished it and added a lot more to it. I think it would be something that some people might find interesting.
Yeah, it's very cool. If people want to check it out, look up The Taunting of a Blinking Cursor, and you will find it. the blinking cursor is it's not the taunting is not that you can't make it past the first screen. You can, in fact, but you're referring to, you know, being a writer and just not making any progress and the anxiety that comes with that. And yeah, it's sort of a top-down Zelda kind of look to the game. It's cool.
Yay! Yeah, it was a lot of fun to work on.
All right. Can you tell us, we're getting near the end here, can you tell us what you're working on right now, or is that a secret?
Like I said, I'm doing some research with the Insight magazine. That is a little bit slow going. This is not related to video games, but it is related in the sense that it was a side product of my research. I have an academic article coming out eventually. It's been accepted, but it hasn't been published yet, about advertising in Playboy in the 70s and 80s. I'm real proud of that one. And then generally, you know, I've got the fishing thing coming up eventually, and there's going to be a lot of changes in my life that it's happening in the next 2 months. So probably most everything is going to be on hold until that's done.
Well, what about, so Hot Tubs and Pac-Man, you know, what did you learn while doing that? Why should someone read that book?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, for one, it is very, very hard to write a monograph during a pandemic. Imagine that. But I think that what I learned doing it is that, you know, even if you have some flawed ideas to begin with, which is what I felt about my master's and then some of my dissertation, like if you keep thinking about it, keep doing the research, then you can come up with something that you're really, really proud of, which is what I ended up with. I'm really proud of that book. I'll probably never read it again because I've read it 10,000 times. But why other people should read it is that it is a work. I think it's a good work, but it looks into some of the gender dynamics of the early industry. It has some different perspectives on you know, how women were able to have an impact on the early industry, what kinds of roles they had in creating games, what kind of roles they had in playing games. You get some of the bro culture history in there, which is interesting and fun and terrifying. You get to find out why I talk about hot tubs in the title. There are multiple hot tubs. And
I know of one hot tub.
There are 2 hot tubs that I mentioned in the book. And then, you know, you also get some ties into how some of this that was rooted in the industry from the very beginning has tied into our industry today, and how those roots are deeply embedded in things that we can really think about and reflect on. Cool.
Well, Dr. Anne Ladyem McDivitt, people can find at Anne Ladyem, that's ANNELADYEM.org. The book, as you've heard, is Hot Tubs and Pac-Man. Dr. Anne Ladyem McDivitt, thank you for being here.
Thank you.